Assalamu alaikum and welcome to today's video, which is going to be all about rest. If you find yourself being tired all the time, no matter how much you sleep, I'm sure you're going to benefit from this video, inshallah, because this was something that I used to struggle with and that I'm still learning to do to some extent, because I've learned with time that there are many different types of rest, and this is something that we're going to be talking about today, inshallah. And I used to have a lot of barriers to actually really resting, and so being on holiday at the moment for the first time in ages, like allowing myself to take time off work, made me realize that this is a topic that needs to be spoken about a lot more, especially when it comes to being a Muslim woman who's got a business or a job, as well as a family to take care of and many other responsibilities. I feel like we're all constantly running like headless chickens, and we haven't been taught enough and haven't been reminded enough how to truly slow down, embrace stillness, rest, take care of ourselves. So let's talk about the signs that you might not be rested, because that's the first thing that you would want to ask yourself, like, am I really rested? Okay. And the first thing would be that no matter what you do in terms of the sleep that you get, you still feel fatigued during the day. That's the first sign. And when we talk about fatigue, it could be physically, it could be mentally, it could be emotionally and spiritually as well, of course. The other sign would be that you find yourself to be irritable and to lack patience. And I'm going to be thinking about the mothers out there straight away, because I mean, being a mom is really difficult, being a parent is really difficult, and at times the degree of our tiredness can be measured by how easily we snap at our kids when they trigger us. And no one wants to be in that situation on a daily basis, because it generates a lot of guilt within us when we do that. And I'm sure that we're all aiming to be the best parents that we can be, inshallah. So one of the signs that you might be tired to a certain degree is your irritability and your lack of patience with the people around you and with yourself. The third sign of being tired would be experiencing brain fog. And that's something that a lot of people struggle with at the moment, and I'm sure that the usage of social media, the amount of time that we spend on our phones, has something to do with that, and we'll talk about that later actually. But if you're struggling to focus, you're probably tired to a certain extent. And then the final sign would be that you feel emotionally drained. Again, no matter how you physically rest, there's something in you that's telling you, I don't have it in me to talk to people. I don't have it in me to socialize. There's something that just makes you feel like your cup is empty, basically. So if all these signs or some of these signs relate to you, let's talk about the different types of rest, and let's see if you're actually filling your cup the way that you should be. Now, the first type of rest, of course, is going to be physical rest. It's the one that we think about first when we think about resting in general, and that involves sleeping well, of course, and also doing things like getting a massage when your body is aching, or simply stretching when you feel like you need it, and also when you don't need it. I'm trying to get in the habit of stretching again on a daily basis, which is something that I used to do and that used to make me feel so much better, subhanAllah, physically. But the first thing to think about is your physical rest. So are you sleeping enough? And for women, studies are now showing that we need a lot more sleep than men, subhanAllah, especially when we are in our winter phase of the month. If you don't know what the winter phase is, check out the video that I've recorded about hormonal cycles. That will be really beneficial for you, inshallah. I'll link it in the description below. But we do need a lot of sleep. And when we spend hours scrolling on our phone in the evening, first of all, we don't get enough hours. And second of all, we don't get enough quality sleep. So maybe it's time to rethink your night routine, especially since the new year is coming. You want to step into that new version of yourself who takes care of herself, who's healthy. Start thinking about your nighttime routine. What are you doing that's not allowing you to fully rest in the night? What are you doing that's stopping you from having that restful and peaceful night? And remove those distractions, remove those bad habits from your life, inshallah. And also, is there any way that you could get a nap during the day? You know, napping is sunnah. The Prophet ﷺ used to take qaylulas, right? Whenever he could. So maybe we can bring that practice back. Alhamdulillah, being someone who works for myself, I get to do that, especially if I go to the gym in the morning and if I get an early start to the day. Getting a nap, or at least doing some sort of meditation when I start feeling a bit tired midday, is something that usually will give me that boost of energy again. And it's usually a lot better than going straight into the let me get a coffee type of habit. I know that there are a lot of coffee lovers out there who can't live without their cup of coffee, but can you do something else? Something that doesn't require an external consumption of something in order to boost your energy. Something that doesn't make you dependent on a liquid, especially since Ramadan is coming soon. And we know that if you are addicted to coffee or to tea as well, usually Ramadan is a lot tougher for you in terms of energy levels. So it might be a good idea to start weaning yourself off those substances before the blessed month of Ramadan comes, inshallah. The second type of rest, which we often forget about, is mental rest. And mental rest basically involves the amount of thinking that you do throughout the day. Like, how much is your brain switched on? How much overthinking are you engaging in? How many decisions and big decisions do you have to take part in during the day? This can be tiring as well. It can be very draining. And what makes it worse is that often the thing that we will do in order to switch off, scrolling or watching a show, is not actually mentally restoring for us. And that's why we find ourselves feeling tired all the time, because we're never really resting. An example of that for an overthinker would be taking a break from work, but actually spending all of your free time thinking about work. I'm guilty of that 100% because I love my job and I am addicted to it to a certain degree, and that's why I'm doing this video right now, because I know I need a lot more mental rest. So if this relates to you, you have to start thinking about ways to mentally rest. I've started doing my morning pages again, which is something that I did 5 years ago, if not more, and I stopped. And I'm just going to show you the book. But my business coach recommended that I start reading The Artist's Way again. This book about bringing back a sense of creativity in your life. And one of the exercises that the author insists that you engage in on a daily basis is the morning pages. The morning pages consist of writing 3 A4 size pages of conscious stream. And it's just like brain dumping everything that you have in mind so that you declutter your head and you allow yourself to bring in the creativity that's hidden behind all of those thoughts that are just stuck in your head, basically. And I know that it works. I know that it's really beneficial. I know that it's a good way to mentally rest, because now the thoughts are not stuck in here anymore. They're not weighting me down anymore. They're on paper. And that helps, alhamdulillah. Another thing that you can do to rest mentally, of course, is going to be meditation or some form of mindfulness practice. And for us Muslims, it's going to be found in our spiritual practices, of course. But what helps deepen your focus and your mental presence and rest when you are praying, for example, or when you're doing dhikr, is also meditating outside of your salah. That's mandatory. And doing those activities that will reinforce your focus and your attention span as well, because we live in a society where everyone is struggling to develop, to nurture their attention span, because everything is so fast-paced. And then, of course, if you have a lot going on mentally during the day, just making a habit to step away from too many tasks that are mentally draining and taking a break, a real break, based on those activities that we just mentioned. The third type of rest that you might be forgetting about is emotional rest, which is all about releasing those pent-up emotions that you have within you. And this can also be done through journaling, but we're going to look more at things like talking about what's going on in your head and in your heart instead of just having an activity that doesn't require someone else. So emotional rest can be done by going to therapy, by talking to your coach, by talking to a friend that you trust about how you're feeling. And that, again, is something that will make a huge difference when it comes to how you feel on a daily basis. Then we have social rest, and this one is probably going to speak a lot more to the introverts out there. If you find yourself being drained, sometimes it's because you've engaged in too many social interactions, a lot more than you could take at that time. And it's important to kind of have that awareness and retrieve yourself from going to social events or from talking to people too much when you feel like your social battery is dead. And the way that you can recharge it is either by engaging more in connections with people that actually replenish your battery, or removing yourself from situations where you meet up with people that are draining your battery as much as you can. If it's a colleague from work, for example, or a family member that you live with, it might not be that easy, but maybe try to put some distance between you and that person. And also avoid them as much as possible. But if you are capable to cut someone off because they drain your energy, then do it. Like so many of us, we have friendships that we know we've outgrown, but just because we are people pleasers, we struggle to let go of some people, and it's doing a lot of damage to our health, to our rest capacity, to our ability to pursue our dreams, to become the women that we want to be. So subhanAllah, like, don't hesitate to let go of people that are just draining your energy instead of replenishing it. The next type of rest, which is the fifth one, is sensory rest. This one is going to speak to the highly sensitive people out there. If you don't know what being an HSP is about, I have a video on that topic that you can check out, inshallah, on the page. I am a highly sensitive person myself, so I know exactly what this involves. An example of that is yesterday I went to Global Village because I'm in Dubai at the moment, and subhanAllah, Global Village is just like Disney World. Like, there's too many people, there's a lot going on, there are noises, there's different type of foods, there's people pushing you. So all your senses are being stimulated in a way that can be overwhelming. And for someone who's a highly sensitive person, that can be really triggering and tiring. So if you find yourself to be triggered a lot, it might be that you are overstimulated by what's going on around you. And sometimes it's as simple as the light in your home being too bright. I hate the big light. I have to fight with my husband for it to not be turned on. So if that's you, maybe just get some lamps and get in the habit of not turning the big lights on at all, because you know it's going to irritate you. If it's a matter of the noise that are around you, is there anything that you can do in order to make sure that you are in environments that don't overstimulate you in terms of sounds? And look at the things that trigger you. And I talk a lot about this in detail in the video about being a highly sensitive person, but find out what your triggers are and stay away from them, or manage them as much as you can. The sixth type of rest is one that you might not have heard about before. It's creative rest. Now, what does creative rest involve? I'm sure you've been through a phase where you just found yourself to not have any inspiration. And that definitely means that you were missing some sort of creative rest. I experienced that all the time, especially being a business owner, being in charge of the marketing strategy of my company, but also having so many things to do. Sometimes I find myself focusing too much on the tasks that have no creativity in them. And then when it comes to being creative, I find myself in front of a block. Like I'm faced with this huge wall where I don't know what to do. I don't know how to be creative anymore. I struggle to write blog posts. I struggle to create content. And a lot of the time it is because I haven't taken a step back to nurture my creativity. And that can be done by exposing yourself to art, to your hobbies, to nature, to traveling, new cultures, new people, new type of conversations, new experiences. And that's why I love traveling so much. And this is what I do when I feel like I'm not inspired anymore. I book a plane ticket and I go somewhere else, and it works wonders. Why? Because I'm not so focused on the tasks that were not inspiring to me anymore. I step outside of all that, I kind of lock it for a few hours, and then I do something else that has nothing to do with that. And this is what reignites that sense of inspiration and creativity within me. So newness, or diving into a passion of yours that's already existing, or trying something new, or talking to someone different, someone who lives in a completely different world as yours, can reignite your sense of creativity, and that's a form of creative rest. Finally, we're coming to the last type of rest, which is probably the most important one for us as Muslim women, and that is spiritual rest. And often when we find ourselves disconnected from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or as we could say, restless in our spirituality, we don't assume that we have anything to do with that disconnection. We think that it's because it's just how things are at times. And to a certain degree, that's true. We all have ups and downs in our deen. However, I think that if we took a more proactive approach to feeling disconnected from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or spiritually dead inside, we would experience that a lot less. And what I mean by that is that when you feel disconnected, a lot of the time, it's not because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pushing you away. Not at all. In fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, if you take a step towards me, I will run towards you. So the reason is probably that you've pushed your deen on the side and you've stopped prioritizing it. You've let a lot of distractions come into your life and take you away from the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why spiritual rest is the most important thing that we should cultivate, because it's the one that makes us feel alive. And if you have that, then it's easy to rest in the other categories that we mentioned earlier. So if you have your focused salah in place, if you have your type of knowledge or seeking knowledge in place, if you have your dhikr, your awrad every day in place, you find yourself having a different type of energy. And I want to emphasize on focused, because you could be doing all of these things throughout the day and still feel like you're not alive within spiritually. And that's because that element of focus is not there. You're doing the things robotically, and therefore you don't feel rested spiritually. You don't feel fulfilled spiritually, and that will impact the other fields of your life. So in order to get to that place where you are focused when you're engaging in your ibadah and your spirituality and your worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you also have to feed into the other categories of rest that we mentioned earlier, so that you can focus in your spirituality. So it's almost like you can't do one thing and not do the other. All these categories of rest are just as equally important, but some of them, of course, will make a bigger impact in your life, and I think that's the spiritual element. But in order to be spiritually focused and fulfilled, you also have to take care of your body, your mind, your emotions, your creativity, and so on and so forth. And then that would act as a domino effect, hopefully. I don't know if that makes sense. If it doesn't, let me know in the comments. If it does, let me know in the comments as well, inshallah. But basically, start with your spirituality. And in order to improve your spiritual practice and rest, also ask yourself, what are the other categories that I'm neglecting? So a good question for reflection right now for you is, thinking about all the categories that I just mentioned, which one are you not nurturing enough? Where is there margin for improvement? And journal about these things and come up with concrete actions to take in order to make changes in the way that you rest. Now, what might come up for you in this moment of reflection is that it is really hard for you to rest no matter how much you try to do it. This is me, okay? Again, I'm addicted to my work. I love what I do, and sometimes it's detrimental to my rest because I always think about my work. I always think about the next thing that I can do, the next way that I can improve my business. And I realized that there are a lot of reasons behind this difficulty to truly relax. So I want to go through some of those so that you might also gain some sort of awareness on what might be stopping you from truly resting, because you're going to have to address these barriers if you want to learn how to really rest. And the first thing might be social pressure. Just simply being in an environment where hustling is glorified and always being busy is glorified. And the first thing that just came to my mind is this habit that a lot of us have to jump out of the sofa when we're relaxing when someone comes into the room, because we feel ashamed for resting, because when we would rest at home around our parents, they would shame us for that. Like, if you have a traditional Moroccan mother, you know what I'm talking about. Like, you'd be cleaning the whole house the whole morning. She's not around to see you do that. You sit down to take a rest and you start watching TV, and then she comes in and she's like, oh, so this is what you're doing? Yeah, this whole time I leave and no one is doing anything. I have to do everything by myself. And this just makes you kind of embody this belief that you cannot rest, you can't sit, you can't chill, you can't relax after working hard, because if you are seen doing so, you will be shamed. And a lot of us have to kind of unlearn that type of behaviors, otherwise we're going to pass it on to our children, and that's going to be damaging for them as well, of course. So the guilt that might be associated to taking breaks because of your upbringing or because of the work environment in which you are, this is something that you need to let go of. As a high achieving woman myself, I know that that guilt in the past might have served me, but it also led me to burnout. And when we burn out, we can't achieve any of our goals, really. We have to take a full stop break, and that is more painful than learning how to rest periodically in order to achieve your goals. So it's okay if it takes longer for you to achieve something that you're working on. But it's not okay if you kill yourself on the way to getting there. Then the second barrier to resting might be about the misconceptions, the limiting beliefs that you're holding about what it means to rest. Rest is not equal to being lazy. Again, related to what we just said about our parents maybe shaming us for resting, maybe that's a limiting belief that you're holding on to really dearly because you think it's making you more productive as well to believe that. And another example of a limiting belief is thinking that rest is equal to just sleeping. We just dismantle that by going through all the types of rest that we need as human beings in order to feel alive and fulfilled. Rest is not just equal to sleeping. The third barrier to resting is more an internal one, and it could be related to the fact that you might be a perfectionist. And if that's you, then you just have to learn to work with yourself, to embrace your perfectionism in a way that's not self-destroying. I'm a perfectionist myself, and alhamdulillah, this is something that I feel grateful for, but I also have to learn to not let my perfectionist lead me to sabotaging myself, really, and setting the bar too high for myself on a constant basis. There's actually a quote that I really love from a book about perfectionism that I'm reading at the moment. I don't remember the title right now, but I will put it on the screen, inshallah. The quote is, "Ideals are meant to be inspiring, not to be reached." And I just butchered that. But when I find the quote and how it was written by the author, I will also put that on the screen, inshallah. But your ideals are meant to be inspiring you. They're not meant to be achieved. Reading that in that book for me was mind-blowing, because all that time I was seeing the gap between what I wanted and where I was as something that I had to bridge all the time. And then having that mindset shift of, wait a second, what if this ideal that I'm envisioning for myself, actually I don't have to reach it. I just have to use it as something that propels me forward. Then it removes a lot of pressure from you if you start seeing things like that. And it allows you to learn how to rest as well, because suddenly you don't have to keep on chasing after this ideal anymore. You just have to use it as something that's inspiring you. In terms of internal barriers as well, setting boundaries is going to be a big one. So a lot of us, we struggle to rest because we struggle to say no. And we find ourselves going to all the places that we've been invited to, doing all the favors that we've been asked, and being drained because of that. So learning to say no is an act of self-love that will also help you really and truly rest, inshallah. Get comfortable with setting boundaries. It's so important. And then finally, your last barrier to resting is probably related to overstimulation. So you think you're resting when you're scrolling or when you're watching something on Netflix, but the truth is that that's not mental rest. And it's not sensorial rest either. So how much are you engaging in activities that involve stillness, where you're not listening to anything, you're not watching anything, you're just sitting there doing nothing? And I know for a lot of people that sounds really counterproductive and not necessary. For example, I was listening to a video by Alex Hormozi just before recording this video. And I love Alex's way of seeing business in general, but there's one thing that I disagree with him, and it's regarding how much work one individual should engage in throughout the year or throughout the day. And Alex is very much about giving it your all and working as much as you can, as much as you physically can. And I think for men that could be something that's possible. But I know that he kind of promotes that whether you're a man or a woman. And I don't disagree with that, because I think we also need to be able to sit still and not do anything and be comfortable with that. Because if you're constantly chasing something, whether it's work task or something else, what are you running away from? Like, what is so uncomfortable in the stillness that you need to avoid it at all costs? And the second thing that I'm thinking about when it comes to working as much as possible, I think even if your work is related to doing something good for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like my job, alhamdulillah, is that how much is your work taking you away from remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because let's just be real for a second. It doesn't matter how pure or how, again, spiritual your job is, work will take you away from thinking about Allah sometimes. And so you have to have those times where you're not doing anything except sitting still and thinking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And non-Muslims won't have that notion of dhikr of Allah the way that we will, of course. And I think real, true, quality dhikr of Allah involves a certain level of stillness. So, removing things that overstimulate you, removing anything that stops you from being mindful at time is going to be important. I'm just going to end on some tips for you to, inshallah, be able to do this. But the first thing that you want to do is really develop that awareness of how am I resting at the moment? How am I not doing it well? What can I improve? The second thing that you want to do is become so involved with this idea of resting that you're going to prioritize it and that you're going to make time for it in your schedule. I have slots in my calendar that say self-care, that will say dhikr, wird, this and this and that, things that I consider activities for rest. Okay, so if you don't have a calendar, what are you doing? Get a calendar ASAP. And the third thing that you want to do is also create a restful environment for yourself, okay? Because your environment is really important. It will dictate the way that you feel as soon as you step into your house. And when we talk about environment, we also talk about the people that surround you. We mentioned that earlier. But let go of any relationships that are draining to you if you can let go of them. If it doesn't involve cutting ties with a family member, of course. And then finally, instead of seeing rest as something that you do once a month when you go get a massage, for example, see it as a daily practice that you incorporate in your daily life, not something that you do when you're on the verge of reaching burnout, which is what I used to do, and that was really difficult to recover from. So make it a lifestyle for you and make it fun as well. Like, engaging in restorative activities doesn't have to be boring. Like, we all know that those are the activities that we actually love engaging in, but for some reason, we stop ourselves from doing it because it's so much easier to grab the phone and start scrolling. But what's easy is rarely what's better for you. So have a strong why as per why you want to do this as well, because this is what's going to make it easy for you to leave the activity that's going to stimulate you easily and embrace the activity that might not be as dopamine injecting, but that will actually be a lot more rewarding. That's it for now. Alhamdulillah, I'm now going to go and rest at the beach, which I'm loving at the moment. And I pray that you also find the way that works for you when it comes to really truly resting, and that you recognize and realize the importance of doing that, inshallah. When we rest in the right way for ourselves, we become better human beings for our children, for our family members, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well. So make it about the bigger picture, not just about this selfish thing that everyone is talking about. No, that's not what it is. That's it for today. I hope this video is beneficial for you. I will see you in the next one, inshallah. And let me know in the comments below how you're intending on resting. Maybe it will inspire someone else who's watching this, and it will inspire me as well, because I'm always on the lookout for ways to rest. Take care of yourself. Ma as-salama.